Hello and welcome to this very special edition of the Newshour. And tonight I have with me an author, and this is no ordinary author. I'm joined by Lakshmi Puri, former diplomat, former Assistant Secretary General of the UN. She's been the first woman to fight for gender justice at a global level, leading UN Women. And of course, how many other roles? Mother, wife, daughter. How many roles have you played, Lakshmi Puri? And now, Labor of Love, Swallowing the Sun. Yes. The new book that you've written. Lakshmi ji, I want to ask you, is this fiction? Is this a real story set in real backdrop of the independence struggle? What is this Labor of Love?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and speaking at a platform that is yours, an empowered woman. And this is a book very much inspired by real life, although it is fiction. And it's very much inspired by my parents, my feminist mother, Malti Desai, and an equally feminist father, who also helped write the Constitution of India. So their love, their romance with India and the remaking of India, as much as their love story itself, has inspired this book.
So your parents' love story set in the backdrop of the freedom struggle, their engagement with it, and their ideas about India, who they were, their identity, and reimagining themselves, reimagining the society around them, and also a new India that was then being envisioned. Let me ask you, the author's note mentions the title Swallowing the Sun is derived from the Abhang, a devotional verse written by Muktabai, in the 13th century poet, saint from Maharashtra. Tell us about this journey. You know, you have Maharashtra roots, also Konkan roots to a certain extent, yes, married to a Sikh. This blending of cultures. Lakshmi, what is this expression that you do in your book of your roots?
So this is, the theme is derived, and the title, Swallowing the Sun, is derived from, as you said, Muktabai's Abhang, which says, Mungi udali akashi, Tine gille suryashi. That is, the little ant dares to fly into the sky, she swallows the sun. So the theme is that anyone, and there are a number of characters in this book, mainly women, but also men, who are touched, so to say, by magic, to try to make miracles, to attain the unattainable in their circumstances, whether they succeed or not. So that is the theme of this, to dare, to have faith, to persevere, and, you know, to dream big. Anything is possible if you do that, if you have faith, if you dare. So that is the theme. And you asked me about my Maharashtrian roots, and which are very much, in fact, this is something unique, I have been told, about this novel. Very few writers in English have really brought out the beauty and the richness of Marathi culture and literature and theatre. And this book tries to do that, the poetry of that time, the theatre, Bal Gandharva, the patriotic songs at that time, Badude ka Ragruhacha Bhintichi Unji Kiti Man Manana Hi Shiti. So, you know, these kind of idioms of Marathi culture. And that was a period. And as you rightly said, I'm taking you back through this novel. It's a time travel back into, again, the magic of that period when young people, and this is a book very much about young people, when young people are trying to redefine themselves, both these are educated young people, getting Western education, they are seeking to define themselves in terms of who they are. Are they Hindus? Are they Muslims? Are they Indians? What caste? What creed? So all of that, and which, are they rural? They are urban? So there is, as you said, it belongs to that era, but it's very, very much recognizable in terms of our present preoccupations and
exploring the self and exploring the society.
And individual versus the state, individual versus the country. And at that time, it was also very much about independence and freedom from British rule and colonial rule. So how did they contribute, and how they were, conflicted about contributing to that?
Amazing. And when you talk about Bal Gandharva, I remember Gandharva Mahavidyalaya, where I learned music from, very much Maharashtra, very much classical culture, music, theatre, all that very rich in Maharashtra. Yes. But Lakshmi, I absolutely love what you've written in your introduction. And let me just read an excerpt, because you're also somewhere exploring the relationship between man and woman.
Absolutely.
And how vulnerability is not necessarily weakness, and how you can be weak and strong at the same time. Because, and let me quote from the book, you say, my parents inspired me to explore the concept of Ardhanarishwar, that there is in all of us a Nari and a Purush, and that a man can be as vulnerable as a woman, can be strong. That in a man-woman relationship, there is constant intermeshing of domination and surrender, love and sacrifice, self-realization and affirmation by the other. That we in life, as in love, keep drawing boundaries, the Lakshman Rekhas, only to dissolve them sometimes with guilt and at other times with abandon. Seems like the reality of every relationship today, anytime, on various levels.
Absolutely.
On various levels. What really made you mention this, and what is the context that you bring out in your book?
So, as I said, this is a novel which is very much an epic love story in epic times of the against the background of the social, political ferment that was happening at that time.
We've seen 1942, a love story. This one is circa?
This is 1920s and 30s.
Okay, 1920s and 30s
up to 1950. So it's 30 years, three intergeneration, with 3 generations covered. So it is in that context, in those days, how did men and women just coming out ahead of their times, discovering what boundaries they have to cross or they can't cross vis-a-vis their men classmates in school. In fact, the book begins with a dangal between an 11-year-old girl and this Bhika. There are 2 girls in a school of 60 boys, and how they cope with that. But also later on Elphinstone College, and later on when she becomes a lawyer. So, all of these situations, how does she and other women characters negotiate their relationships? It's, in my view, it's a very fascinating exploration of those nuances. And you mentioned Bal Gandharva. This Bal Gandharva, symbolizes that Ardhanarishwar. And those passages about the celestial singer are indeed insight into what this Ardhanarishwar concept is. And also Guru and Malti's relationship, the 2 main protagonists, their relationship is very much about that.
And
what you
Malti
read
is
out.
based on your mother, Malti Desai.
Yes.
She's the main character.
Yes.
It's also a story about women empowerment and how you break what are quote-unquote traditional Lakshman Rekhas and how you go beyond that and yet be an achiever. Not just somebody who's breaking rules and Lakshman Rekhas just for abandon.
Absolutely not. And she does face difficulties. She does face resistance. She faces failure, like many of us do in our lives. But she is undaunted. And there is always this endurance and ability to rise above that failure. So that's that feisty, gritty woman that she is shown as. But there are other fascinating characters. I think we were earlier discussing what is the power of this novel. The power of this novel is that it's not only one big story, but there are so many stories, powerful stories within stories, and a vast and a very rich cast of characters who are in themselves, worthy of a separate novel. And in fact, my original novel was 270,000 words, which I have compressed to 150,000.
Okay, and therefore, part 2 of the book or a following book is definitely on the cards, as I can see it. But let me also explore the book. There's also a coming-of-age story where the young characters are engaging in a conversation, pretty much like the conversation young people even today have. And not so young people as well, have this conversation about the independence struggle, including most agreeing with Mahatma Gandhi's route of non-violence being the only way to achieve independence. But there are some who have questioned that passive, non-violent route and said that we should have been, more aggressive and we should have picked up arms because what Gandhi did was a little apologetic and B-team of the British. You explore these conversations. Isn't this conversation or this debate also part of our present contemporary India, the politics and the society?
Absolutely. Although this is set in the early part of the 20th century or up to the mid-20th century, it is as contemporary as can be, this novel. Because the same debates and contestations, the political ones, the social ones, they are as alive today as they were then. But of course, the context has changed. We are in an independent country. And in that context, of course, the discourse has a different meaning. But at that time, there was also, my characters are very much discussing the contention between the Hindu Rashtra idea of Veer Savarkar versus what the Congress was outlining. And also, as you said, the armed resistance to the British versus passive resistance. And then many of them, Netaji, also following Netaji's. So all those ideas of how to take the country forward towards its destiny, the rightful destiny and place in the world, those questions are, of course, as alive today. And they are a carryover of what history has taught us and we can see in history, including in this novel.
And people are today probably more open on interpretation. There was,
Absolutely.
at that time, a certain interpretation that was handed down generations. Yes. Today, the youngsters are re-looking at all of this and interpreting it in their own way in the backdrop of the modern world.
Absolutely. And even these characters at that time, sometimes, they are participating in Simon Commission protests. Sometimes they are doing picketing, and sometimes they are wanting to continue with their studies and join the government or join the courts, practice in the British courts. So there is that conflict. And also, they admire the Western ideas. And you know, the ideas of liberty, fraternity, and equality. And at the same time, they are wanting to assert their cultural, Indian cultural heritage and identity as much as, and relive them and, you know, rekindle them as much as absorb the best of the West. So there is that very interesting dialectics at play in the novel. And they are very eclectic. Also, sometimes they are attracted towards one ideology, sometimes they are attracted towards another ideology. So at that time, and sometimes both, they embrace both, you know, Hindu Mahasabha and Congress. So there is also this,
there is no
like
either or.
Exactly.
There is no either or. You can have some views from this side, some from that side, and the human mind actually toys with both of these expressions and somewhere finds its golden middle.
Absolutely.
Your characters in the book also relive these discourses, contests, and awkward resolutions integral to the Indian freedom movement. How do you relate these discussions in anticipation to the birth of the country as it is today, India, that is Bharat, which is, to my mind, an ongoing project? We're still building our nation. So how do you sort of resolve that and make it into the present continuous?
Well, as I think we've already looked at that issue of how the young people then were engaged in different, first the education path, and then how do they participate in the freedom movement. And the freedom movement was their participation there was an expression of their nation contribution to the making of the freedom of a nation. Today you have the same young people. Their contribution is more in terms of building of a new India and shaping. And what I have tried to convey in this book is, although my characters were not Mahatma Gandhi or Nehru or Ambedkar, but they, in their own way, were not just drops in the ocean in terms of building the country. Each one of them made a contribution. Without them, we would not have got freedom. So it's the same thing now. Young people today have to and are making their own contribution in different fields and contributing to the building of a new India that is Bharat, that is being shaped.
So I'm very fascinated with this whole concept of women empowerment as you see it through your characters. Malati and Kamla, the two central characters in the novel, how they find their way through Hindu traditions and actually step out of what was traditionally the boundary for girls, and they move out. And then you also describe the education of girls as a backdoor way to break Manu's injunctions against both lower caste and young girls being elevated to equality with upper caste boys and men. It's a very fascinating part of your book. Share with us where that came from.
So that actually came from the real life story of how my mother was actually a case of Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao in so many ways. Her father, the character of Baba in this book, is very much shaped by and inspired by her father, Baba, who went against the norms of the time when he saw that his wife had died very young because of repeated childbirth, early marriage. So he was determined that his daughters will not suffer the same. And he sent them away to an orphanage school in Indore. You know, made sure that not only did they do school, but college also. So that is certainly, that journey and what difficulties he faced is very much reflected in it. And much of it is, of course, imagined because I do not have the records of that time. But some thread of fact is there. You know, you began by saying fact and fiction. Of course, this is a fiction.
So you
it is a novel.
Flirt with the
yes,
facts
it's always,
a bit as
it's always invention, imagination, and that's the beauty of a novel, as distinct from a biography. It is not a biography. It is very much an imagining of what it was, what it may have been. And it is a fascinating journey throughout. And it is pan-India, because it begins with Ratnagiri, goes on to what I've called it Vaishali, but which is actually Gwalior, and then Indore, Bombay, you said ferment, you know, which is the hub of the freedom movement, and then Banaras, Delhi, Simla. So these are all the different places where action plays out.
You also talk about Veer Savarkar.
Yes.
This country is fascinated with Veer Savarkar. And there are only extremes, reactions that come in. Some just love it, and that character, that personality, that persona, and there are others who just hate it, abhor it. What are you trying to say about Veer Savarkar through your book?
Well, he is very much admired by young Guru, Malti, and their friends in the when they are in Elphinstone College, and they enact a play by Mama Varerkar there, but which is a patriotic play. But also, as they progress in their, and he goes into exile, and as they progress in their involvement with the Mahatma Gandhi's Satyagraha, then they get diverted away from Veer Savarkar. Because Veer Savarkar himself recedes from the political arena after his release from exile.
And he becomes more middle part
and the Hindu Mahasabha, he becomes, and he goes to Ratnagiri, which is the beginning of my novel. So, but I very much, one of my chapters is called The Star of My Motherland. And this is a quote from one of his great hymns to the motherland, Ne Majhachine, Matrubhumila. When he was in exile, rather when he was in UK, earlier on in Britain, he yearned to be with motherland. So the characters, stand up and like Veer Rasse, they would recite his, and that was really true at that time. They were really fired up.
Do you recall any of those poetries as somebody who was growing up in that era and something
Absolutely.
that defined?
So this book, as I said, is full of the poetry of that era. And my father used to, every evening, recite a poem from his book of poems. And many of them were, of course, patriotic. Many of them love poems. Others about the fisherman's song. So I grew up steeped in Marathi poetry, but also Sanskrit Mahakavya, so that also forms part of my, the weft and warp of my novel. So I'm sure readers will enjoy that journey into the literature of that time and the poetry of that time. And I, in fact, want to very much, you mentioned about women's empowerment, but it is really the novel about swallowing the sun. All those who try to do the unattainable, or impossible. All those who are put down, for example, women in particular, women and girls in particular, how they must assert themselves and try to swallow the sun. I think there is a very, telling anthem for that, which I would like to quote. And it is by N.V. Tilak, and I have translated it in the book. And it goes like this. Bola havete malakay tyatse pure jaan to meets mazhe bada. And the English, I'll give you a glimpse of the English version. Am I not complete and auspicious? The purpose of God's creation felicitous? It matters not to me what is your opinion. I know well my own strength, my dominion.
More power to women.
And also that applies, if I may say, Navika, to all of us Indians and to India. I know well my own strength and my dominion.
Absolutely. What better note to end this on? But just on a very personal note, you're also a wife of a senior minister in the cabinet. I just want to ask you, when you explore the relationship between man and woman, what has been your husband, Mr. Hardeep Puri's reaction to this book? Has he applauded you, your achievement, and your fantastic spin of words through which you've really spun this whole beautiful yarn of thoughts, ideas, and struggles, as well as dreams of generations? What did he say to you when he first saw this?
Well, he has been very supportive. And someone I was talking to today about my book, and who's been in the book industry and in the world of literature, told me, remember, the first book is the most about who you are. So in that sense, when he read the first draft of this, the 270,000 word, he read it through in one day, through and through, and gave me a feedback. And he recognized so much of not only me, but us in it. I think I've said enough.
You've said it all. And that's what makes relationships strong. And as you say, Ardhanarishwar, strength does not necessarily have to be aggressive. Strength can be from a very, very weak and vulnerable position. And these are just colors on a canvas that keep changing. Yet relationships are what you are together. The us in me and mine. Well, thank you very much, Lakshmi Puri, and I do hope this is just one of your firsts, because you already say that there are many stories possible out of the side stories and other stories that are going on. So we're waiting for the sequel and the sequel. And the way I see it, I'm a diehard romantic as well. The way I see it, I also see it coming up on celluloid. Are you in conversations? Because a love story with these kind of settings in a period film, any interest? Are you talking to anybody?
Well, I think there has been some expression of interest, but I would first like this book to sail forth, to flourish, to become really part of the readership's darling before it goes on to the OTT or web series. It's certainly fit for a web series. I can easily think of at least 32 episodes. But yes, but I'm first looking forward to its literary journey into the world.
Thank you very much, Lakshmi Puri. We wish you the very best with the book, with the expression on celluloid, whether it is on OTT or on the big screen. But thank you very much. And thank you very much for going back to the story of love in a very cacophonous present day environment that we live in. Thank you, and salute the spirit of women empowerment that you express through this book.
Thank you so much.